The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council fell silent as Taman stepped up to the speaking platform. His hands trembled slightly as he held the data tablet containing years of research. Around him, representatives from 40 different species sat in their designated sections, most of them looking bored or distracted. A few were openly checking their communication devices. Taman cleared his throat and began. Honored council members, I present my findings on the humans, a species that once walked among our ancestors and helped establish the very foundation of this council. A ripple of laughter spread through the chamber. Ambassador Velcris of the Andari Collective leaned back in his seat and spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear.
Here we go again.
Another young scholar wasting our time with fairy tales. Taman felt his face grow warm, but he pressed on. The evidence is substantial. Ancient records from 23 different worlds mention humans during the early expansion period. They describe a bipedal species with remarkable adaptability, extraordinary endurance, and a talent for both warfare and diplomacy. Stories for children, another ambassador called out. Next you will tell us about the sky dancers or the eternal flame beings. But Taman refused to back down. He had spent 5 years gathering this information, traveling to forgotten archives and dusty libraries across a dozen systems. I have physical evidence. Genetic markers in several species show human DNA integration. There are weapons, tools, and even preserved tissue samples. The humans were real. An elderly Valerian named Counselor Rexon raised his hand for silence. Young scholar, even if we accept that this species existed, what does it matter? They have been gone for over 800 years. Why bring this before us now? Taman took a deep breath. Because the old texts say the humans defeated something called the First Ravager Wave. And I believe the Ravagers are returning. The chamber erupted in chaos. Shouts and arguments filled the air. The Ravagers were the nightmare that haunted every species in the galaxy. The ancient enemy that consumed worlds and left nothing behind but silence and darkness. Before anyone could restore order, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Wu Jin, the commander of the Council Guard, rushed into the chamber with his security team. His face was grim as he approached the council leadership. Forgive the interruption, Wu Jin said, his voice cutting through the noise. But we have received distress signals from the Outer Rim colonies. Multiple systems have gone dark in the past hour. The last transmissions showed massive mechanical constructs stripping entire planets. The chamber went deathly quiet. Every ambassador understood what this meant. The stories their grandparents told them, the warnings passed down through generations, were coming true. Taman felt a chill run down his spine. He looked at his data tablet, at the image of a human soldier from the ancient records. The human stood tall in armor that seemed both advanced and worn, holding a weapon and looking directly at the camera with determined eyes. Over the next 3 days, the situation grew worse. 7 more systems reported Ravager attacks before going silent. Millions of lives were simply erased. The Council's military forces scrambled to establish defensive positions, but they were fighting an enemy they did not understand. Taman worked without sleep in the archives, searching for anything that might help. He found references to a great weapon the humans had used, something called a quantum disruptor, but the details were incomplete. Most frustrating of all were the repeated mentions of a human retreat. The records said humanity had withdrawn from the galaxy, but no one knew where they had gone or why. On the 4th day, something strange happened. Taman was deep in the oldest section of the archives when he noticed a storage container he had never seen before. It was made of a material he could not identify, and it hummed with a faint energy signature. His scanner showed it was nearly 1,000 years old. Inside he found a small device, cylindrical and covered in symbols he recognized as human writing. When he touched it, the device suddenly activated, projecting a holographic map into the air. A section of space labeled the Silent Zone pulsed with a red marker. The Silent Zone was a quarantined region on the edge of known space. No ship that entered it had ever returned. The Council had declared it forbidden territory centuries ago, and most people had forgotten it existed. Taman ran to find Captain Hyejin, a friend from his academy days who now commanded a diplomatic vessel. He found her in the officers' quarters reviewing casualty reports from the Outer Rim. Hyejin, I need your help, Taman said, spreading the holographic map across her desk. I think I found where the humans went. Hyejin studied the map with her sharp eyes. She had always been the practical one, the person who got things done while others debated. The silent zone? Taman, that is a death sentence. Even if your humans are there, we have no way to reach them. We have to try, Taman insisted. The Ravagers are destroying everything. If the humans really defeated them before, they might be our only hope. Hijin was quiet for a long moment, then she nodded. I will request permission from the council. But the council refused. They called it a waste of resources, a foolish chase after myths when real people needed defending. Councillor Rexon, who had been sympathetic to Taman's research, took him aside after the meeting. The council is afraid, Rexon said quietly. Afraid of the Ravagers, yes, but also afraid of what it means if you are right. If the humans were real and they left us, then we must ask why. What did we do to drive away such powerful allies? That night, Taman could not sleep. He kept thinking about the human in the photograph, about entire civilizations being erased, about children who would never grow up because the council was too proud to admit they might need help from a legend. Hyojin came to his quarters before dawn. Pack your research. We are leaving in an hour. The council approved the mission? Taman asked, surprised. No, Hyojin said with a slight smile. But my crew voted and they agreed with me. Some things are more important than following orders. If we are wrong, I will face the consequences. But if we are right and we do nothing, I could never forgive myself. Wujin met them at the docking bay. Taman was shocked to see the stern commander there. I am coming with you, Wujin announced. The council needs to be protected, but right now, finding answers is the best protection I can offer. Besides, someone needs to keep you academics from getting killed. The diplomatic vessel Eternal Dawn departed Nexus Prime before the morning shift began. As they entered the coordinates for the Silent Zone, Taman stared out at the stars and wondered what they would find. Were the humans still alive? Would they even care about the galaxy that had forgotten them? The journey took 6 days. As they approached the Silent Zone, their sensors began detecting strange readings. Energy signatures unlike anything in the database. Massive structures that should not exist. And then, as they crossed the boundary, everything changed. The view screen lit up with contacts. Dozens, then hundreds, then thousands of ships. Not active, but not abandoned either. They were dormant, sleeping, waiting. And at the center of it all was a structure so large it defied comprehension. A ring that could wrap around a star, covered in lights that were beginning to wake up. Hyojin gripped her command chair. By the ancestors, they were real. The humans were real. Alarms started blaring as automated defense systems locked onto the Eternal Dawn. Weapons that could turn their ship into dust in seconds, charged with power. A voice speaking a language the computer struggled to translate, echoed through their communication systems. Unidentified vessel, you have entered Terran sanctuary space. State your purpose or be destroyed. This is your only warning. Taman stepped forward and spoke into the communication system, his voice shaking but clear. We come seeking the humans. The galaxy needs your help. The Ravagers have returned. There was a long silence. Then the weapons powered down and a new voice came through. It was firm, commanding, but unmistakably tired. A council ship comes to us after all these years, speaking of Ravagers. The irony is almost amusing. You will be escorted to the command station. Do not deviate from the designated path, or our hospitality will end abruptly. As escort fighters surrounded them, sleek and deadly craft that made council military ships look primitive, Taman realized they had just changed everything. The humans were not legends. They were real. They were powerful, and they remembered. The escort fighters guided the Eternal Dawn through a maze of defensive platforms and dormant warships. Taman pressed his face against the viewport, trying to take in everything he saw. Each ship in the human fleet was a masterpiece of engineering, sleek and purposeful in ways that council vessels were not. They looked like predators built for speed and lethality. The ring structure grew larger as they approached. Hyojin's navigation officer reported that the ring was over 2 million kilometers in diameter. It was not just a station. It was an entire world, curved and spinning to create artificial gravity. Cities and forests covered its inner surface, connected by transit systems that glowed like veins of light. How did they build this? Wujin muttered, his military mind struggling to comprehend the logistics. The resources alone would require stripping a dozen solar systems. Their ship docked at a port that seemed designed for vessels much larger than theirs. As the airlock connected, Taman felt his heart racing. He was about to meet the people he had spent years researching. The legends were about to become real. The airlock opened and a squad of human soldiers stood waiting. They wore armor that seemed to shift and adapt, and their weapons were held with casual confidence. But it was their faces that struck Taman most. They looked tired, not physically exhausted, but weary in a way that spoke of long centuries and hard decisions. The lead soldier, a woman with sharp eyes and gray streaking her dark hair, stepped forward. "I am Commander Jiwon of the Preservation Project. You will follow me to the command center. Admiral Minho is waiting." They walked through corridors that were both familiar and alien. The technology was clearly advanced far beyond council standards, but there were human touches everywhere. Artwork on the walls, plants growing in carefully tended gardens, music playing softly from hidden speakers. These were not cold military installations. These were homes. "How many of you are there?" Heejin asked as they walked. Jiwon glanced back at her. "Enough. We brought everyone who could be saved. When the council issued the extermination order, we had less than a year to evacuate." Taman stopped walking. "Extermination order? What are you talking about?" Jiwon's expression hardened. "You do not know your own history. I suppose that is convenient for the council. Come. The Admiral will explain." The command center was a circular room with holographic displays showing the entire sanctuary and the space beyond. Dozens of humans worked at various stations, monitoring systems and coordinating the awakening of the fleet. At the center stood a man who could only be Admiral Minho. He was not what Taman expected. The ancient record showed humans as warriors, fierce and intimidating. Minho was certainly strong and carried himself with authority, but there was also sadness in his eyes. He looked at the three visitors with an expression that mixed curiosity and old pain. "Welcome to Terran Sanctuary," Minho said, his voice measured and calm. "I am told you came here speaking of Ravagers." Heejin stepped forward and bowed respectfully. "Admiral, I am Captain Heejin of the Galactic Council. 7 star systems have been destroyed in the past 2 weeks. The attacks match the ancient descriptions of the Ravager swarms. Millions are dead and our defenses are failing." "And you came to us," Minho said. "The species the Council tried to erase from existence. You want our help?" "We need your help," Taman said, unable to stay quiet. "I have spent years studying your people. The records say you defeated the first Ravager wave. If anyone knows how to stop them, it is you." Minho gestured to the holographic displays. "Let me show you something. Computer, display historical file Exodus Alpha." The room darkened and a new hologram appeared. It showed a massive space battle. Human ships fought alongside Council vessels against the Ravagers. The fighting was brutal and desperate. Ships exploded. Whole fleets were consumed. But slowly the humans turned the tide with weapons and tactics that devastated the mechanical swarms. "We fought together," Minho narrated. "For 3 years, humans and Council forces bled side by side. We lost billions. Earth itself was scarred by Ravager attacks. But we won." The hologram shifted. It now showed human worlds peaceful and rebuilding. Then Council fleets arrived, weapons charging. "The Council feared us after the war," Minho continued, his voice growing colder. "They saw our military strength, our technology, our refusal to be controlled. The Andari Collective convinced the others that humans were too dangerous to exist. They said we would become the next threat, the next Ravagers." The hologram showed cities burning, human ships trying to evacuate while Council forces fired on them, children crying, families torn apart. It was genocide, pure and simple. Taman felt sick. This cannot be real. The Council would never— "The Council did," Jiwon interrupted. "They hunted us across 20 systems. We had a choice, fight back and prove them right, or run and save who we could. We chose to run." Wujin's face had gone pale. As a Council guard, he had sworn to protect all species. Seeing this betrayal shook him to his core. "How many did you save?" 3 billion, Minho said quietly. "Out of 22 billion humans. The rest died in the evacuation or were killed by Council forces. We brought them here to this forgotten corner of space and we built a new home. We have been watching the galaxy ever since, waiting to see if the Council would grow wise enough to deserve a second chance." A younger officer approached the Admiral. He was lean and intense with the bearing of a Special Forces soldier. "Admiral, the Reaper Corps is fully awakened and demanding to know why we are talking to Council representatives instead of taking revenge." Minho nodded. "Thank you, Commander Dohyun. Tell them to stand by." He turned back to the visitors. "You want our help against the Ravagers. But why should we care? The Council abandoned us. They tried to exterminate us. Let them face the consequences of their fear and hatred." Heejin met his gaze without flinching. Because you are better than they were. Because innocents are dying. Because revenge is easy, but being the better person is hard. Better person? Do-hyun laughed bitterly. They murdered our families. They destroyed our worlds, and now they want us to save them. No, Taemin said, finding his voice. Not them. The people who ordered your extinction are mostly dead. Their grandchildren are dying now. Children who never knew what their ancestors did. Civilians who just want to live. Minho was quiet for a long time, studying the three visitors. Finally, he spoke. You will stay here as our guests while I consult with my officers and the Civilian Council. Ji-won will show you to quarters. But understand this, we owe the Galactic Council nothing. We will not throw away human lives to save people who tried to erase us from existence. They were led to comfortable quarters in a residential section of the ring. Through the windows, Taemin could see human cities in the distance, connected by bridges and transit tubes. Normal people lived here, farming and working and raising children, unaware that the galaxy beyond their sanctuary was burning. That night, Taemin could not sleep. He reviewed his research, comparing it to what he had learned. The records had been sanitized, edited to remove any mention of the Council's betrayal. History had been rewritten to make humans into a convenient myth. Hyjin came to his room around midnight. I spoke to my crew. They are as shocked as we are. Some want to leave immediately, ashamed to be associated with the Council. Others want to stay and beg for forgiveness. What do you want? Taemin asked. I want to make this right, Hyjin said, but I do not know how. How do you apologize for genocide? How do you ask people to forgive something that cannot be forgiven? Woo Jin joined them, looking older than his years. I spoke with Commander Do-hyun. He told me about the Reaper Corps. They are the survivors who chose to become soldiers to ensure humanity would never be helpless again. They want blood for blood. I do not blame them. The next morning, they were summoned back to the command center. Minho stood with his senior officers, and the tension in the room was thick enough to cut. We have made our decision, Minho announced. The answer is no. We will not help the Council. You are free to return to your ship and leave. We will not harm you, but we will not fight your war. Taemin felt his hope crumble. He had been so sure that humans, with their legendary nobility and courage, would rise above the past. But he had been naive. Hatred and pain could not be overcome so easily. However, Minho continued, we will not stop individual humans from making their own choices. Any who wish to volunteer may do so. But the Terran fleet stays here. It was not much, but it was something. Taemin bowed deeply. Thank you, Admiral. That is more than we deserve. As they prepared to leave, Ji-won approached them. For what it is worth, I am sorry you had to learn the truth this way. But maybe it is better that someone finally knows. Maybe your generation can be better than the one that came before. The Eternal Dawn departed the sanctuary carrying a small contingency of human volunteers, including Do-hyun and his Reaper Squadron. It was not the fleet they needed, but it was a start. As they jumped to hyperspace, heading back toward Council territory and the advancing Ravagers, Taemin looked at the humans who had chosen to help. They sat quietly in the cargo bay, checking their weapons and armor, preparing for a fight they did not have to join. Why did you volunteer? Taemin asked Do-hyun. News of humanity's discovery spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Some species reacted with wonder and hope, others with fear and shame. The ancient records were pulled from archives everywhere, and people began to see the gaps in their history, the convenient holes where human contributions had been erased. But for every person who felt guilt, there were those who felt justified. Ambassador Velcris spoke loudly in the council chambers, warning that humans could not be trusted. They hid from us for centuries, building weapons in secret. Now they return when we are weak, ready to take revenge for old grievances. Taemin watched the debate with frustration. He had returned to Nexus Prime with Hyjin, bringing the human volunteers and their testimony. But instead of gratitude, they found suspicion and paranoia. The Council was more interested in protecting their version of history than accepting help. 3 more systems fell to the Ravagers, while the politicians argued. Back at the Terran sanctuary, Minho called an assembly. Every human who could attend gathered in the great amphitheater at the heart of the ring structure. 3 billion people, the last remnants of humanity, came together to decide their future. Somin stood on the stage representing the Civilian Council. She was a teacher, A mother and someone who had spent her life trying to preserve human culture and values. She spoke with a voice that carried both strength and compassion. For 800 years we have lived in peace here, Somin said. We have raised our children without war, without fear, without hatred. We built this sanctuary not just as a hiding place, but as a testament to who we want to be. Now we must decide, do we stay true to those values or do we let old wounds define us? Do-hyun, who had returned from his mission with the council ship, stood to speak. His Reaper Corps filled an entire section of the amphitheater. Thousands of elite soldiers who had volunteered to carry the burden of defense so others could live in peace. I went to council space, Do-hyun said. I saw their worlds burning. I watched the Ravagers tear apart ships full of families trying to escape. And you know what I realized? Those people looked just like us when we fled. Terrified, desperate, innocent. A ripple of murmurs went through the crowd. Many had lost loved ones in the exodus. The pain was still fresh even after centuries. But I also saw their leadership, Do-hyun continued, his voice hardening. They still lie. They still manipulate. They still refuse to admit what they did to us. If we help them, they will use us and then discard us again. We will be tools, not allies. Ji-won took the stage next. As the lead scientist who had developed many of their advanced technologies, her opinion carried weight. The Ravagers are not like anything else in the galaxy. They do not negotiate. They do not stop. They consume everything. If we let them destroy the council, they will eventually find us here. Our children, or our grandchildren, will face them alone. Is that the legacy we want? A young pilot named Ki-hyun stood up in the audience. He was barely 25, born in the sanctuary and trained in the Reaper Corps. He had never seen Earth, never known the galaxy beyond their hidden home. I'm tired of hiding, tired of living in fear. My whole life I have heard stories about what the council did to us. Part of me wants to watch them burn, but another part, the part my parents raised, knows that is not who we are. Minho listened to all of them, feeling the weight of command like never before. Whatever decision they made would echo through generations. He thought about the human soldiers who had died fighting the first Ravager wave, sacrificing themselves to save species who would later hunt their descendants. An older woman named Yoonji, who had survived the exodus as a child, spoke last. Her voice was quiet, but everyone listened. My parents died covering our evacuation ship. Council fighters shot them down while they were unarmed. I have carried that hatred for 800 years. But I look at my grandchildren now and I realize something. If I teach them to hate, then the council won. They turned us into the monsters they feared. But if I teach them to be better, to help even those who wronged us, then we win. We become the species we always said we were. The debate continued for hours. Arguments flew back and forth. Some wanted revenge, some wanted peace, some just wanted to be left alone. But slowly, a consensus began to form. Meanwhile, in council space, the situation grew desperate. Yejin had been recalled to command a defensive fleet. She stood on the bridge of a heavy cruiser, watching her tactical display as Ravager forces advanced on her homeworld. Her second officer, Yoonji, was a distant cousin from a colony world. She had joined the fleet to protect her family, but now faced the reality that she might not be able to save them. Captain, we are receiving evacuation requests from the surface. There are not enough ships. Yejin felt helpless. Even with the few human volunteers and their advanced weapons, they were vastly outnumbered. The Ravagers adapted to every tactic, learned from every encounter, and never stopped coming. A message came through from the surface. It was Hyejin's younger brother, his face dirty and scared. Sister, they are breaking through the defense grid. Please the children, we need more time to evacuate the children. The transmission cut off as a massive explosion lit up the planet's atmosphere. Hyejin made a decision that would haunt her forever. She ordered the fleet to retreat, abandoning the surface to buy time for the evacuated civilians to escape. It was the right tactical choice, but it meant leaving millions behind. Ki-hyun and his squadron of human fighters watched the council fleet retreat. They had been flying support missions, their superior technology allowing them to punch above their weight, but now they saw the reality of the Ravager advance. We could slow them down, Ki-hyun said over the squadron channel. Give those people more time. His wingman, another young human, responded immediately. We are not authorized. Admiral Minho said volunteers only, and only for defensive support. Ki-hyun watched refugee ships struggling to escape the gravity well, overloaded with families. He thought about what Yoonji had said in the assembly. About being better. About teaching the next generation not to hate. Then I am volunteering, Ki-hyun said, breaking formation and diving back toward the planet. His entire squadron followed him. They fought like demons, their advanced fighters weaving through Ravager drones and targeting the larger ships with precision strikes. They bought precious minutes, allowing 3 more evacuation ships to escape. But the cost was high. Half of Ki-hyun's squadron was destroyed. As his damaged fighter limped back to the Council fleet, Ki-hyun understood something important. This was not about the Council. This was about who humans chose to be. The video of the human fighters sacrificing themselves to save Council civilians spread across the galaxy within hours. It was broadcast on every news channel, shared on every communication network. People saw young humans who had every reason to hate the Council, dying to save alien children. Back at the sanctuary, the assembly reconvened. Minho stood before his people, and for the first time in centuries he allowed himself to feel hope instead of just duty. The vote has been counted, Minho announced. By a margin of 58%, humanity has chosen to enter the war. Not for the Council, not for revenge, and not for glory. We fight because we are human, and humans do not abandon innocents to die. The amphitheater erupted in mixed reactions. Some cheered, some wept, some sat in silence. But understand this, Minho continued. We do this on our terms. We will help defend against the Ravagers, but we will also demand answers. The Council will acknowledge what they did to us. The truth will be known. And when this is over, humanity will have a voice in the galaxy again. Soman smiled through her tears. Then we better make sure we win. For ourselves, for those we lost, and for the future we want to build. Juwon began the process of mobilizing the fleet. Thousands of ships that had slept for centuries roared to life. Weapon systems that had been maintained but never fired were brought online. The sanctuary, built as a home, prepared to become a fortress. Taemin, watching the news from Nexus Prime, felt something he had not expected. Not relief, but responsibility. Humanity was coming to save them, but they were doing it despite the Council, not because of it. That had to change. He approached Counselor Rexon with a proposal. We need to tell the truth, publicly. Admit what the Council did. If humans are willing to be better than us, we need to be worthy of that sacrifice. Rexon looked old and tired. The truth will destroy the Council's legitimacy. Species will question everything we have built. Good, Taemin said firmly. Maybe we need to question it. Maybe we need to build something better. As the Terran fleet prepared to leave the sanctuary, mothers hugged their children who were going off to war. Engineers checked systems one final time. Soldiers said goodbye to lovers and friends. And at the center of it all, Minho looked at the holographic display showing both their hidden home and the burning galaxy beyond. Take us out, he ordered. Time to remind the galaxy what humans really are. The fleet emerged from the silent zone like a wave of steel and light. Thousands of ships, each one a masterpiece of engineering and determination. They were not coming as saviors or heroes. They were coming because someone had to stand against the darkness, and they had decided it would be them. The galaxy watched in awe and fear as the humans returned to the fight. The Battle of Crimson Gate would be remembered as the moment when the galaxy either survived or fell into darkness. It was the last major defensive position before the Ravagers could reach the core worlds where billions lived. If this line broke, there would be nothing left to stop the mechanical swarm. Hyejin stood on the bridge of her cruiser, watching the tactical display with growing dread. The Council had assembled every available ship, pulling forces from across known space. But it was not enough. The Ravagers outnumbered them 3-1, and their forces grew stronger with every ship they consumed. Captain, we are detecting massive energy signatures emerging from hyperspace, her sensor officer reported. Multiple contacts, over 2,000 ships and climbing. The view screen flickered, and what Hyejin saw took her breath away. The human fleet had arrived. Their ships moved with a grace that Council vessels could never match. They flew in perfect formation, each ship positioned to support the others. And at their head was Admiral Minho's flagship, a massive dreadnought that made even the Council's largest battleships look small. Minho's face appeared on the communication screen. Council fleet, this is Admiral Minho of the Terran Defense Force. We are here to fight. Transmitting tactical data and combat protocols now. Follow our lead if you want to survive. Wu Jin, who had been assigned to coordinate the defense, felt a surge of hope for the first time in weeks. Admiral, we are ready to follow your command. What are your orders? Split your fleet into 3 groups, Minho ordered. Center group holds the line and draws their attention. Left and right groups prepare for flanking maneuvers when we create the opening. And most importantly, when we tell you to break formation and scatter, you do it immediately. No questions. Understood? It went against everything Council military doctrine taught, but Wu Jin trusted the human commander. Understood. All ships, you heard the Admiral. Move to assigned positions. The Ravagers advanced like a tide of metal and malice. Their drones filled space, blotting out the stars. Behind them came larger constructs, ships built from the wreckage of consumed civilizations. They did not communicate or threaten. They simply came, inevitable as death. Yuna, the Terran tactical officer, coordinated the combined fleet from her station. She had spent centuries studying warfare, preparing for a battle she hoped would never come. Now her knowledge would be tested against the galaxy's oldest enemy. All ships, hold your fire until they enter optimal range, Yuna commanded. We only get one chance at a first strike. Make it count. The Ravagers crossed the threshold and space erupted in violence. Human weapons fired with devastating precision. Each shot found its target, punching through Ravager shields and hulls with weapons that seemed to ignore normal physics. The Council ships added their firepower, and for a moment the advance seemed to slow, but the Ravagers adapted. Their shields shifted frequencies, their formations changed, and they began to return fire with weapons designed to tear through both armor and energy barriers. Hajun led his fighter squadron through the chaos, his craft dancing between capital ship fire and drone swarms. He was one of Do-hyun's best pilots, trained from childhood to fly like he was part of his ship. Gold Squadron, target those command nodes. Hajun ordered, marking targets on the tactical display. Hit them hard and fast, then break left before they can track us. His squadron dove through a wall of fire, their shields flaring as they absorbed hits that would have destroyed Council fighters. They unleashed their missiles at point-blank range, destroying 3 Ravager command ships in a single pass. But the enemy was learning. On their next run, the Ravagers were ready. 2 of Hajun's fighters were caught in a crossfire and exploded before they could evade. They are adapting faster than expected, Hajun reported. We need to change tactics every few minutes or they will counter us. On the ground, or rather in the boarding pods, Sergeant Junho prepared his Marine unit for the most dangerous mission of the battle. They were going to board a Ravager dreadnought and plant a quantum disruptor at its core. It was a suicide mission and everyone knew it. Junho was old for a Marine, having served since the Exodus. He had been a young man when the Council hunted them. When he watched his friends die covering evacuation ships, that hatred had burned in him for centuries, fueling his training and his determination to never be helpless again. Now he was about to die saving the descendants of those who killed his friends. Check your gear, Junho ordered his squad. Once we are inside, we have maybe 10 minutes before the Ravagers flood our position. Our job is to get the disruptor to the core. Nothing else matters. A young Valerian soldier had been assigned to his unit, part of the integration effort. The kid looked terrified, barely out of training. Junho remembered being that scared once. Stay close to me, Junho told the young soldier. Do exactly what I do when I do it. You will be fine. The boarding pod launched, accelerating toward the massive Ravager ship. Around them, dozens of other pods were destroyed by defensive fire, but their pod made it through. They crashed into the hull, cutting through the armor with shaped charges. Inside was hell. The Ravagers had not bothered with atmosphere or gravity. It was a maze of machinery and hostile constructs, all of it designed to process captured resources, including people. Junho's squad fought their way deeper, using weapons and tactics that the Ravagers could not easily predict. But the cost was high. One by one, his Marines fell. The young Valerian soldier took a hit meant for Junho, his shield failing under the concentrated fire. As Junho cradled the dying soldier, he saw his daughter in the kid's face. Remembered her last words before she died in the evacuation. Don't let hate make you like them, Dad. I am sorry, the Valerian whispered. I was not fast enough. You were brave enough, Junho said gently. That is what matters. With only 3 Marines left, including himself, Junho reached the core. The quantum disruptor was a magnificent piece of technology, designed by Jiwon to disrupt the quantum entanglement that Ravager hive minds used to coordinate. One disruptor could take out an entire command network. Plant it and set the timer, Junho ordered. Then get back to the extraction point. What about you, Sergeant? One of his Marines asked. Someone needs to make sure it detonates properly, Junho said, checking his ammunition. I will hold them off while you run. That is an order. He did not tell them there was no extraction point left. Their boarding pod had been destroyed and the Ravagers were closing in from all directions. This was always meant to be a one-way trip. As his Marines reluctantly retreated, Junho set up his position. He thought about his daughter, about the life he had lived, about the choices that brought him here. He had joined the military to protect humanity from another genocide. Now he was dying to protect the species that tried to erase them. The irony was not lost on him. The Ravagers came like a wave. Junho fired methodically, making each shot count. He had been trained by the best, and even facing impossible odds, he was still one of humanity's finest warriors. He held them off for 9 minutes, long enough for the disruptor to arm fully. As his shields failed and the enemy closed in, Junho smiled. For humanity, he said, and for everyone who deserves a chance to live. The quantum disruptor detonated and the entire Ravager dreadnought went dark. The hive connection severed. Thousands of drones and ships suddenly lost coordination. They drifted aimlessly, easy targets for the combined fleet. It worked, Yuna shouted from her tactical station. The command network is down. All ships press the attack now while they are disoriented. The human and council fleets surged forward. Hajun's squadron targeted the confused Ravagers with brutal efficiency. Wujin led his battle group in a flanking maneuver that cut through the enemy formation like a blade. But the battle was far from over. The Ravagers had other command ships, and they were adapting to the quantum disruption. A counterattack nearly broke the Council's left flank before human reinforcements arrived. Do-hyun fought on the front lines, his command ship leading by example. He found himself fighting alongside Wujin when their section of the defense was breached by Ravager boarding craft. The two commanders fought back-to-back, a human and a Valerian, protecting each other against an enemy that cared nothing for their history or grievances. You are not bad for a council soldier, Do-hyun said between bursts of fire. You are not bad for a legend, Wujin replied, reloading his weapon. They held the line until reinforcements arrived, and when the enemy retreated, they stood among the bodies of both human and alien defenders who had died together. The battle raged for 16 hours. Ships were destroyed on both sides. Thousands died, but slowly, inevitably, the human tactics and technology turned the tide. The Ravagers, for the first time in recorded history, retreated. As the enemy fleet withdrew, Heejin collapsed into her command chair. Half her fleet was gone. Her ship was barely functional. But they had won. Minho's face appeared on her screen. He looked exhausted, and she could see grief in his eyes for the humans who had not returned. Casualty report? Heavy, Heejin said. But we are alive. Because of you. Because of your people. Our people paid a heavy price, Minho said quietly, including Sergeant Junho, who gave his life to make that disruptor work. He was a good man who had every reason to hate the Council. 6 months after the Battle of Crimson Gate, the galaxy was a different place. The Ravagers had not been destroyed, but they had been pushed back beyond the outer rim. Joint Human Council fleets patrolled the borders, ready to respond if the mechanical swarm returned. But more importantly, the galaxy had begun the painful process of facing its past. The council chambers had been rebuilt after a Ravager attack damaged the original structure. The new design included a section specifically for human representatives, equal in size and prominence to the founding species. It was a symbolic gesture, but symbols mattered. Taemin sat in the observer gallery, watching as the council prepared for its most important session in centuries. He had spent the past months compiling a complete history of humanity, including the genocide and the Exodus. His work had been published across every major network, and it had changed everything. Some species had accepted the truth immediately, ashamed of their ancestors' actions. Others had resisted, claiming the records were fabricated or exaggerated. But the evidence was overwhelming, and even the skeptics could not deny it forever. Counselor Rexon stood at the central podium, looking older and more tired than ever. Today we gather to formally address the crimes committed against humanity by this council 800 years ago. We cannot change the past, but we can acknowledge it and work to build a better future. The chamber fell silent as a holographic display showed the historical record. The Ravager War, humanity's sacrifice, and then the betrayal. Images of human worlds burning, evacuation ships being fired upon, families torn apart. It was broadcast live across the entire galaxy, ensuring that everyone would know the truth. Ambassador Velcris, who had been one of the loudest voices against humanity's return, stood to speak. His voice was subdued, lacking its usual arrogance. My ancestor, Velcris III, was one of the council members who voted for the extermination order. I have reviewed the records and I can find no justification for his actions except fear. Fear of what humanity represented, a species that would not bow to our authority. He paused, his hands shaking slightly. On behalf of the Andari Collective and my family, I offer our deepest apologies. We know words cannot heal these wounds, but we hope they can be a first step toward reconciliation. One by one, representatives from each species that had participated in the genocide stood and apologized. Some were genuine, full of remorse and shame. Others were clearly political, done out of necessity rather than true regret. But all of them acknowledged the truth. Finally, it was humanity's turn to respond. Hijin had been chosen as Earth's ambassador, a role she had never wanted but could not refuse. She stood before the council in her dress uniform, medals earned from recent battles glinting on her chest. The human delegation has heard your apologies, Hijin said, her voice calm but firm. We appreciate the courage it took for some of you to speak truthfully, but apologies alone are not enough. We need real change. She activated her own holographic display, showing a document that had been drafted over months of negotiation between human representatives and reform-minded council members. Soman had been instrumental in its creation, working with Taman and others to craft something that could prevent history from repeating. This is the new covenant, Hijin announced, a framework for a reformed galactic union that includes protections against persecution, mechanisms for accountability, and equal representation for all species. No single species or coalition can ever again have the power to order another's extinction. The document was comprehensive, addressing everything from military oversight to cultural protection to economic fairness. It had teeth, real enforcement mechanisms that would prevent the concentration of power that had enabled the genocide. The human delegation will put this to a vote among our people, Hyojin continued. If it passes, we will rejoin galactic civilization as full partners. If it fails, we will return to our sanctuary and leave you to face the future alone. The chamber erupted in debate. Some council members embraced the reforms immediately, seeing them as necessary and just. Others saw them as an attack on the council's traditional power structure. But everyone understood that humanity held the leverage. Without human technology and military support, the next Ravager attack could be the last. While the politicians debated, life continued across the galaxy. On a frontier colony world called New Hope, Ki-hyun walked through a market that served both human settlers and alien refugees. He wore his Reaper Corps jacket, but he was off duty, just a young man buying supplies. A group of Valerian children ran past him, chasing a ball through the crowded streets. They were laughing, playing innocent. One of them bumped into Ki-hyun and looked up with wide eyes, clearly recognizing the human military uniform. "Are you really a Reaper?" the child asked in accented standard. Ki-hyun knelt down to the child's level. "I am, but right now, I am just someone buying too many vegetables because I am terrible at math." The child giggled and her mother hurried over, apologizing profusely, but Ki-hyun just smiled and continued shopping. He thought about how different this was from the hatred and fear that had defined human-alien relations for so long. In another part of the galaxy, Do-hyun stood in a training facility, watching a mixed unit of human and council soldiers go through combat exercises. He had retired from active command after Crimson Gate, but he could not stop serving entirely. Now he trained the next generation, teaching them to fight together instead of apart. Wu Jin had become his co-instructor, an unlikely partnership that had grown from mutual respect into genuine friendship. They stood side by side, critiquing the trainees' techniques. "Your squad is getting sloppy on the left flank drill," Wu Jin commented. "Your squad still telegraphs their movements too obviously," Do-hyun countered. They looked at each other and laughed. A year ago, they had been on opposite sides of history. Now they were building something new together. After the training session, Wu Jin asked the question that had been bothering him. "Do you think we can really move past what happened? Can people forgive something so terrible? Do-hyun was quiet for a moment, watching the mixed squad help each other through an obstacle course. I do not know if we can forgive, but I know we can choose to be better. That is what Sergeant Jun-ho taught me. He died saving people who looked like those who killed his daughter. Not because he forgave them, but because he refused to let hate define who he was. Back on the Terran sanctuary, life had also changed. The ring structure was no longer a hidden refuge, but a symbol of human resilience. Tours were organized for alien visitors who wanted to understand human culture. Schools taught children about both Earth's history and the galaxy they were rejoining. Ji-won stood in her laboratory working with scientists from a dozen different species. They were collaborating on new technologies, combining human innovations with alien perspectives to create things neither could achieve alone. It was exactly what she had hoped for when she first entered the sciences. Knowledge shared freely, advancing together instead of apart. Jun-ho had not died at Crimson Gate, though it had been close. He had been found by a rescue team, badly wounded but alive. Now he spent his time tending a memorial garden on the sanctuary, a place dedicated to both human and alien casualties of the Ravager War. A Valerian mother came to the garden one day carrying flowers. She approached Jun-ho hesitantly, unsure if she would be welcome. "My son died at Crimson Gate," she said quietly. "He was in your squad. He told me about you in his last message, how you tried to protect him." Jun-ho's eyes filled with tears. He remembered the young soldier, remembered holding him as he died. "He was brave. He saved my life." They stood together in silence, two people from different species united by shared loss. Then they planted the flowers together, adding to the garden that was slowly becoming a place of healing. Taemin continued his work as a historian, but now he also served as a cultural liaison between humans and other species. He organized exchanges, facilitated discussions, and helped people understand each other beyond the stereotypes and propaganda. He visited schools across the galaxy, telling the true story of humanity. Not as legends or monsters, but as people who had faced impossible choices and tried to do right. The children listened with wide eyes, asking questions that adults were often too proud to voice. "Why did they come back to help us?" one child asked. "After we were so mean to them?" Taemin smiled. "Because being kind when others are kind is easy. Being kind when others are cruel, that is what makes you truly good. Humans chose to be good even when it was hard." The vote on the new covenant took 3 weeks. Within human space, the debate was intense. Some argued for isolation, believing the galaxy would never truly change. Others pushed for engagement, seeing an opportunity to shape a better future. Salman spoke at rallies and town halls, making the case for hope. "We have spent 800 years hiding, healing, surviving. We did good work here, building a society we can be proud of. But the universe is big, and there are people out there who need what we have to offer. Not our weapons or our technology, but our example. We can show them that species can choose kindness over fear." When the votes were counted, the result was narrow but clear. Humanity voted to accept the new covenant and rejoin galactic civilization.